Grief, Gratitude, and Greatness is a production of Recursive Delete Audio Visual.
When someone close to us dies, having a reminder of them that you can see every day and keep close to you can be a great comfort. So it's no surprise I'm drawn to Lori Mason's memorial quilts. Each piece that she creates is thoughtfully designed with the deceased loved one in mind. She gets to know about them and transforms garments like their favorite Hawaiian shirts, their judges' robes, uniforms, and other personal fabrics into a piece of art that reflects their lives. Head over to LoriMasonDesign.com and check out examples of how she honors each individual's unique life with her art. Her process is well documented and will give you a sense of the curiosity and intention that she brings to each quilt project. It's a wonderful gift we can give ourselves, snuggling under a quilt that's an artful remembrance and celebration of those we love. Head over to LoriMasonDesign.com or to our show notes to learn more. Grief, Gratitude, and Greatness explores the different ways we grieve, the gratitude that allows us to persevere, and the greatness we discover along the way, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Sarah Shaoul. At 70 years old and battling pancreatic cancer, Ben Orion's mom, Susanne Schumann, was ready to go. She had been given a 3 to 6 month life expectancy and let her family know that she was choosing death with dignity. Her family and friends organized a celebration where she made an announcement about her plan. Over the next few weeks, Ben and his siblings took turns caring for their mother. On Ben's last visit, they shared a beautiful day where the palpable tension within the house seemed to clear. They spent a carefree time enjoying each other's company. He prepared a hearty breakfast and dinner, and she devoured both. The stress over her condition was fading, and a lightness was taking its place. That evening, as she prepared herself for bed, she told Ben that tomorrow would be the day. Ben reassured her that she didn't have to, that she could wait, but that he was there for her. And for the first time in his adult life, he went to sleep beside his mom. At 3:30 in the morning, she woke up and told Ben, "I want to do it now." As promised, Ben did as his mother requested, assisting her as she chose to end her suffering. He leaned forward at the side of the bed and they held each other. Releasing her embrace, she said, "You just have to let go." Those would be her last words. He and a few of her friends watched and waited. After an hour, Ben became tired, lifted the covers, snuggled in close to his mom, and fell asleep. By the time he woke up, she had died. Oregon was the first state to legalize death with dignity, and 23 years later is one of only 8 states to allow terminally ill individuals to take their own lives. Showing up and being present for someone who has made this decision is hard enough, even without taking into account local laws and the moral judgment of others. I would think that not having to worry about the legal ramifications would change the dynamic. Families could attend to their loved ones when they choose to die, instead of being concerned with personal responsibility. The focus should be on the dying person.
My mom likely would have followed through and ended her own life anyhow. But of course, being able to do it legally under the auspices of the state kept us safe and allowed for more comfort in regards to the preparation and the expectations and understanding like that how it would occur. There would have been greater uncertainty in that regard if we had been in a different state. But my mom, she had told us as teens, my older sister and my younger brother and I, that if she ever got so sick that she couldn't essentially go to the bathroom by herself, that she would take her own life. And she usually said something like that in her way of a little bit of flourishing bravado and incredible stubbornness and brashness. That was the way she expressed herself. So my siblings and I, we knew that my mom she never really said things she didn't mean. She more said things she meant to a fault. And so we never really doubted that. I think that her mother in Berlin killed herself when she became infirm. While I didn't focus on that in regards to how my mother proceeded to get sick and use Oregon's death with dignity legislation, it certainly makes even further sense in regards to the certainty she had that she would someday do that if she became infirm to that extent herself.
So your grandmother also took her own life.
I think she had Parkinson's. I don't know if that was pre or post World War II, probably after. I think when she realized it was getting worse, I think she threw herself off a roof.
Oh my gosh. When did you learn that?
I knew that as a young adult and then forgot it and then learned it again and then forgot it. And then, but I know it now and it's an interesting part of her growth.
Yeah. Right, right. When you were there with your mom when she died, did you think there would be other opportunities to visit her again? Did you think that would be the last visit?
We never knew just how, the acute phase of her pancreatic cancer would exhibit itself. We had never been through that. So we were sort of just on a care schedule, where as my brother and sister, they were both living in Portland. So they had their shifts, and the two of us probably had the closest relationship between her and my siblings. So I was looking forward to helping and be a part of it. And there was already the sense of the possibility of impending grace that I was picking up on. There was such an amazing experience of grace that I witnessed in regards to her follow through. It didn't really have these tags along with it of, too many harmful or really painful associations other than precisely what she was doing. Had we been in a different state where we couldn't do that with so much structure, the possibility of her reaching that, and me having been able to witness that grace would have been endangered. It might not have come to pass.
Death with Dignity provides this kind of scaffolding or a guide for how to do this in a way that is helpful to the person who is ending their life and the people around them.
Yeah, it does. Throughout my life, every now and then, I've heard a story about someone who was lucky enough to have been able to have been with family around their dying individual and been able to express that later on that had been a very beautiful, well-arranged event that allowed everyone to grow and grieve and feel without as much fear that this is a part of everyone's life and will be a part of everyone's life. That I think there's far more stories probably where people aren't allowed to experience that in a healthy way. Death with Dignity legislation probably allows for a framework to enable that more often.
I'm also wondering about your siblings and the experience that you alone shared with your mom. I mean, your mom had some friends present as well.
Yes, people had been caring for her off and on. It took quite a bit of energy and attention, especially in the last week where she was taking more and more morphine. My brother was on for a little bit, then had to work and be with his family. My sister was on for a bit. She had been on for 48 hours and I got the call. So when I called and I essentially tagged her out, I certainly didn't know that I was going to get woken up that night with her saying, this is the time. No one is in a place to say no to someone at that moment. So I simply facilitated what she wanted, which was call my sister, call my brother, call two friends, call the Death with Dignity advocate that they had assigned for us, and then proceed to mix up the barbiturates like at 3 a.m. So my sister was sleeping, my sister and brother didn't pick up. The Death with Dignity advocate didn't pick up. And then the two friends did, and they came over.
Was there a sense of reassurance when they came over? How did you feel about being alone through that?
It was so incredibly amazing to have my mother show me a peaceful determination to both do this for herself and for me, that it just didn't matter. I mean, I'm so grateful that I was able to be there And for her friends to have walked in, I find it was probably very, very valuable for them too. That's about as much as I think about it for them. I mean, I was so focused on my mother, and I was simply just a foot away from her. And I think I may have backed up at one moment and let them lean over her, for a moment. But I think she was already asleep by the time they walked in the door, because from when she told me to when I mixed up the barbiturates to when she drank it, I think it was only 7 or 8 minutes, 10 minutes. And then when you drink those barbiturates, she literally put her, from a lying position, me with my knees on the carpet next to her, she just reached up and wrapped her arms around me. And that only lasted a couple seconds. And she said, and now all you have to do is let go.
If you'd like to support our work with grief, gratitude, and greatness, consider becoming a backer on Patreon. Your support allows us to deliver conversations that help to dissolve the stigma and evolve our culture around grief. You'll find a link to contribute via Patreon in the show notes. And if you have a business that supports people who are listening to our show, let's talk about how you can sponsor an episode or 2 or 3.
When your mom found out that she was terminally ill, you guys had a celebration of life. You and your siblings threw a celebration of life for her.
She may have hinted at it. I think it occurred to all of us that was the right thing to do, knowing her. She was well known and well admired and loved for all her complexity. And my sister and I probably organized it the most with her blessing. We tried to just let her know that to give us the list of people, and we'd take it from there.
And how many people showed up?
I think it was probably about 70 people, 60. She had an upstairs living room in her condo. She had several couches and coffee tables and places, and it was really standing room only. And she sat back on one of the couches. Every seat was taken, every ottoman, every standing spot, straight down to people looking over the railing of the stairs going down to her next level. And we had made T-shirts in rainbow, colors of the rainbow. Every different colored T-shirt with all like a nickname for her was printed on them, and those were handed out the door. So everyone, it was like very, very colorful, which is the way she was. So she talked to people, and people read things, and people told her what, their memories of her and how much they loved her. And it lasted about 2 hours from start to finish. And she had said that she would kill herself, I think, that night after the party.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Or the next day or something.
Were you guys feeling like, let's keep this party going?
Actually, I think I did buy into it, because it had been, a couple months, 2 or 3 months. So she said it, and I'm like, wow, is this what someone does? Is this like this? And so when the next day came and it was very clear that she had changed her mind, it was actually difficult, because it just a tug on the emotions of her announcing something like that and having to shift. But it didn't take away from how beautiful the night was.
You and your siblings were kind of emotionally prepared for that to be it. And so when it wasn't, I imagine it was a whole mix of emotions, probably great to have more time with your mom, but like that this pain that she was dealing with and the unknown of when it would end.
The unknown of when it would end. And, her pain was our pain. Our pain was our pain as well, but it was a painful experience. It wasn't until those last moments for me where it became incredibly beautiful and beneficial, despite the tragedy of having gotten cancer and for her life to have ended. But the process of it, nevertheless, was beneficial. So yes, it was painful, though, at that time because of what had come before it.
At this celebration of life, your mom was very ill. I imagine it was pretty taxing on her to receive 70-some people and have meaningful engagement with so many people in such a short period of time. How was that for her?
She was always the center of attention in most rooms. She had been taking, morphine somewhat off and on for the previous 2 weeks, or painkillers. So she knew the party was planned. She knew people were coming over at what time. And so she put on her nice clothing, which was very colorful and ethnic, and sat herself down on the couch after, an hour after taking some pain medication. And she just soaked up the love. I mean, she just was a love sink. And And so it was okay for her. She was in her happy place.
It's so beautiful. I love that you guys did that, because I often reflect on the fact that sometimes it takes a funeral to get us all to come together. And I often say, why didn't we come together when this person was still living? That event was a celebration of life. And I so wish we all were celebrating life more. I often also say, I want to talk about how this person lived, not how they died.
Yeah, whether it's the pain of a death or just the struggle of the fact that life is difficult sometimes for us on very less significant ways, but we feel them significant, in the moment every day. It's important. It's so important for us to remember that the reason we're living is the moments that we get,
Yeah.
and try to keep things in perspective and love our loved ones every moment of every day that we can.
It's interesting, too, in this moment that we find ourselves in right now, where so many of us are quarantined. What you got to experience with your mom, a lot of people can't do right now.
Oh, yeah. That's a horrible part of what seems to be a portion of the COVID experiences. This concept of tunnels of people, waiting for the attention of doctors where family aren't allowed. And it's an image, and it's horrible.
Has that crossed your mind more recently? Like, what if that had been the situation with your mom? I mean, has that created a clear delineation of now in this moment and wow, what I got to experience?
I have not compared it up till now with what could have been because of this pandemic, but every single time I have ever thought of what my mom did and shared with us, and I was the lucky one to be, at her bedside, I have never thought about it without having been grateful and impressed with how incredibly gracious and true and it was, and how lucky I was. So I know that I was lucky and fortunate to the ultimate in regards to experiencing the death of a parent. It is something that very few people get, but more people could get that.
I'm a big fan of that book, Being Mortal, and Atul Gawande. He speaks about how we have kind of medicalized, if that's a term, death. Doctors are there to save lives, not to be there
Mm-hmm.
to attend
Right.
to death. That goes against what all that they've studied and learned. People choose to separate themselves from death.
Yeah, it's a really multifaceted concept in my head. There's the general societal fear of death. You don't see it because people push it away. There's the impulse to push it away towards the hospital, which doesn't really need to be. I could see there might be a lot of reasons where people say this needs to be, but in this instance, death was really inevitable, as at some point it will be for everybody. And there are a lot of people who choose home and hospice, but probably not nearly as many who just don't make that choice. And I was scared of it too, but somehow I lucked into being there.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of Grief, Gratitude, and Greatness. We appreciate you following the work we do and would love it if you'd share us with your friends and family. Your recommendation helps us reach more ears and build upon the work we're doing.
They called her Susie, but she had a nickname Sushu for the acronym for Susanne Schumann, and I think she sold jewelry under that name.
Jewelry
Yeah.
she made, or did she?
Yeah, she was an expert necklace maker, and she had studied old glass and tribal and ceramic beads from around the world for many years. In addition to being a very advanced psychotherapist, she had this necklace making area that was always wild and established, and with all the tools for making necklaces, which she sold in nice stores.
Do you have any necklaces that she made?
I've got something tucked away. I think she made for me with some dichromatic glass or something. But she would, put her big beaded, necklaces in art shows, and down here in Eugene, Oregon, she would get accepted into the mayor's art show. And get some awards. And she loved it. She traveled the world a little collecting stuff.
What do you see as some of the influences that she's left with you?
From a young age, one example is there was one stop sign she didn't believe in on the way home. And that shaped me. She's like, this is not my stop sign. This is our society stop sign. There's no reason to stop here. And she would blow past it because she had judged it was safe. and it was, but it really, that formed me. It really was a strong image in my head that we all have to obey the majority of our societal agreements. But I have been known to push the borders a little bit more. And I think that, in a safe way, or in a way I feel is okay, I will roll through a stop. I'll tell you.
It sounds like, she made you feel comfortable with questioning authority.
Yeah, she made me comfortable questioning authority, questioning rules, taking things into my own hands, and hopefully being smart about it. But she poo-pooed a lot of societal norms, and everyone knew her as that person who was audacious.
In that piece that you wrote for Utne Reader, it's such a beautiful piece. And there's this part where you talk about you're tempted to do this irreverent act after she died. Drive her, I think, to the crematorium in her own convertible with the top down.
I actually considered that. So, I crawled in bed next to her, and I wasn't really touching her, but, I was right up to her. And maybe I had my hand on her shoulder. In fact, I did. But when I woke up and there she was dead, that's crazy from memory. But I got up. I knew how amazing it was right away. I started writing that piece sitting next to her just for a bit, but I did. And there wasn't really a hurry. I knew my sister needed to be given an opportunity to come and see her, and my brother before we had a service come pick her up. But I thought she had a convertible. It was upstairs. She would have gotten a kick out of that. I thought about putting her in the convertible with glasses on, a la Weekend at Bernie's, and take some photos of her around town in the convertible. But of course, it flashed through me, and I thought, okay, and I can push the limits here. This is going to be a forever memory. And I put the glasses on her, and I was like, if you've ever started to do something like that with a dead body, which I know is a morbid thought, but it is, you realize it's not quite the same as imagining it, and it wasn't. I said, nah, it's not. I'm not going to mess around. She was stiff, and nope. I did think about it.
What most surprised you about the experience of being there with your mom when she died?
It did surprise me that the way they had it set up with these barbiturates, that one does fall unconscious very, very quickly. It surprised me. Like, I knew immediately that what she said to me, now all you have to do is let go. I was like, I knew right away that she had given me a great gift. I certainly was very surprised at that moment where I had been sleeping, and suddenly I was roused awake by her shoving me in the most amazingly kind of warm, pleasant evening, looking out at the stars through these windows. She said she wanted to do it now. So that concept of moving from this existence to whatever else is next, and being able to say, I'm taking that step. You want to do it, want to see me there? That was, and until that's happened, it'll be surprising to anybody.
I can't even say I can only imagine, because it's incredible. In that piece that you wrote, you described just this beautiful, wonderful day that you got to spend with her.
The 2 nights before had been tough. I think she had been taking a lot of morphine, and I showed up, and on a hunch, I moved the morphine away from her, so she'd have to reach over for it farther. And the next morning, she was awake and she was cognizant, and she started shuffling through all the papers that she thought she had to deal with in regards to her estate and arrangements. So that day, she was fully back. She was weak and skinny as all could be, but she was really there, and she was lucid. And so I made her some delicious food, which she ate. And throughout the day, in the morning she ate, and in the evening she did. Leading up to that had been difficult, up to that moment, especially when I arrived and she didn't know day from night on the morphine she was on. So for it to have suddenly released and to have her been there with this something in the background that part of me must have known she was close. That was sort of what I talked about in that piece, this pervasive like lightness in the air where everything was swiftly changing to reach this moment where she decided to die.
You believe that the morphine kind of kept her from having that lucid, very present moment. And that's by not being able to access that, that's what gave her that day, or the ability to have that day.
It's true. I've never really thought of that, but it is very, very true. And I appreciate you saying that.
You knew that intuitively somehow.
I did. I picked up on it, and by moving it away, she really stopped taking it. She took a little bit at one point, and by the time she had decided, she regained her lucidity, and as deep as she was, she wouldn't have been able to come to that moment.
When she did wake you up in the middle of the night, did you have any hesitation at all, or were you?
She woke me up and she just said the words, "I want to do it now." And I think the first two words in my head to myself were, "Holy shit." And I said, "Are you sure?" I just said that to her. "Are you sure?" And she just said yes. And I could hear it in her voice. And so I got up. Yeah, it was the one night I'd slept next to her. I'd gone to sleep, sleeping next to her, gone to bed. And so I got up and I went over to her side and I, looked in her eyes and kind of make sure that what I thought I had heard was real. And we got very quickly to who she wanted to call and to where the barbiturates were that had been prepared by the doctor. And it went pretty quickly from there to me making the phone calls to reading the instructions on the sheet.
Do you think that having that really amazing day with her just prior, her last full day, do you think enjoying that amazing day with her, do you think that made it easier or more difficult?
It made it better.
It made it better.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have had that last day with her.
When you think about the gifts of this experience, I imagine there are both the gifts of having that day with her, but also the gift of attending to her when she did die. What can you speak to in particular about the gifts associated with going through that experience with her?
There were a lot of different types of gifts. One was being able to witness such deep conviction, peaceful conviction, which I think is another way of saying grace, maybe. And to witness such grace, such rare grace that we usually, from day by day, how horrible death is and how it should be feared. What can we do to avoid it? And certainly all of that stuff has its associated merits, but integrity, having a deep integrity, and that she was my mother, that's in me. She showed me that it was in me. She made it more a part of me because she chose to, and because I lucked out, being there at that time. I know that I have, a moment in my future that I can hope to be as potentially graceful in and as helpful to the ones around me in regards to how they can perceive death in their turn.
Grief, Gratitude, and Greatness was created by me, Sarah Shaoul, and is a production of Recursive Delete Audiovisual in Portland, Oregon. This episode was produced and edited by Jack Saturn, with music by Samantha Jensen. Subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Word of mouth helps us find new listeners, so please leave us a review and let your friends know about us. More information about this episode and how to contact us can be found in our show notes and at griefgratitudegreatness.com. You'll also find links to follow us on Instagram, Patreon, and Facebook. Join us next time. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Sharing a meal with others is my favorite place to engage in deep, meaningful, and fun conversations. On the Four Top podcast, 3 thought leaders join host Catherine Cole for a fast-moving roundtable discussion of the hot-button topics in food and beverage. The show covers a wide array of topics from farming to fine dining. The Four Top is a James Beard and IACP award-winning national food and beverage podcast presented by OPB for NPR One. Start listening now at thefourtop.org, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts.